Eric, thank you so much for being with us here today to have this, I think, is probably one of the most pressing and profoundly important conversations in our culture. So let me start by saying kia ora, talofa lava,
Kia ora,
hello.
talofa lava, mahalo, hello.
I was debating where do we start today, and then it sort of dawned on me, well, let's talk about whakapapa, your genealogy, your family history, because you got a bit going on in your family lineage, right?
Yes, I'm a bit of a fruit salad. Yeah, so I am Polynesian and European, and the Polynesian side of me is Samoan and Maori, and the European side of me is English and Italian.
Wow.
So if I break that down, my Maori side goes back to the iwi, the Ngā iwi, or the tribes of Ngā Te Awa and Ngai Tahu and Tūhoe. And my Samoan side actually touches both islands of Samoa, in Upolu and Savaii, and that goes back to the villages of Lepa, Lalumanu, and Neiafu. And my European side is from Middlesex and Uxbridge, England, and that's because my grandfather was a wonderful man, and he in part sort of raised me and contributed positively to my life, and so I'm named after him, Eric Joseph George. So he was Eric Joseph George Sr., and I'm Eric Joseph George Jr. And last but not least, my Italian side is through my mum's maiden name, the Rossetto family, and they're from the Genoa in the north of Italy. And so, yeah, a bit of a fruit salad.
That is a pretty impressive history there, mate. That's amazing. So you've got I guess you could say you've really got a real serious stake in all of this question about race relations in New Zealand.
Yes.
You've got a foot in many camps here. So tell me, what is your current take on the current state of race relations in New Zealand? What do you think about things?
My current take is that, let me sort of take it from the objective to the subjective, just sort of tell like a little personal story that I often do tell. But why I think it's important is because it really goes to show, number one, the sort of state that we're in as a society, where we have, swallowed and drunk the Kool-Aid on these negative concepts and theories, which a lot of it actually come from, as Bro Brendan, from overseas, such as critical race theory and conflict theory and all that. And secondly, it's good just to tell sort of, where my heart's at in a personal way. And secondly is also because I really got motivated to get involved in this sort of navigating these sort of race relations and all these other issues because of the personal reasons. So let me start first personally. When I see my name, Eric Joseph George, Eric George, I think of my grandfather. My grandfather was born in 1940s in Uxbridge, there in Middlesex, in the southern part of England. He came to New Zealand in 1960s. He fell in love with my beautiful grandmother, Savalipe. They met at a factory. They got married, had beautiful mixed children. My dad and also my auntie, his sister, just the two of them. Then they had grandchildren, so that's me and my two older sisters. And now my grandma's got, she's the last one left. I always say, Grandma, God bless you, you're pushing on 80-something, and you're the last of the Mohicans. So we thank God that the old lady's still alive. And so she's got 7 great-grandchildren. And so the whole point of that is, my grandfather engaged relentlessly and consistently in what is known in Samoan as tautua, which is a very important aspect of our culture. And tautua means service. And in Te Reo Māori, you could translate that to mahi tautoko, which means, service as well. That means that, the Samoan proverb, ole ala I le pule o le tautua, which means the path to leadership is through service. In Māori, it goes something like, ko te ara ki te rangatira, rangitiratanga ko te mahi tautoko. The path to leadership is through service. So my grandfather, may he rest in peace, he passed away in 2008 when I was around 17 years old. And off his back, off the hard sweat and his tautua, his service, we have 3 to 4 generations of my grandma's family which wouldn't exist. Because he, for 30, 40 years, right up to his deathbed, I remember he was in Waitakere Hospital, and the cancer had spread from his stomach and it was now ravaging his body. And all he was worried about was going to work and, contributing to the family right up to his last breath. And so, not only would I not exist here, but I have 3 to 4 generations of my grandma's family that he helped bring over, that he set them up with work permits, that he set up the immigration, him and my grandma working tirelessly. And so then for all of that to happen, and for me to carry his name, that when I hear his name, it's not an ego thing. When I hear my name, I think of his name. And I think of his memory. And, he was whiter than you, brother, had, bluer eyes than you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, and then for all that to happen, my brother Brendan, and then for someone with a PhD in gender studies to turn around and tell me that he was racist, it's actually bloody offensive.
Yeah.
It's actually very offensive.
Yeah, I think that's a great take on it, because I think one thing that I want to talk about critical theory in a moment, but it seems to me that even the current conversation and even the people who are perhaps promoting a strong emphasis on race relations, it seems to be it's binary, but in actual fact, there are many cultures that, and the Pacifica cultures played a huge part and are woven intimately into the history of our nation, and yet they seem like a sort of is that people talk as if that's only Māori and European history here. It's not, right? There's a whole complexity to this. Yeah,
no, so true. And so, bro, Brendan, and even, I forgot what show it was, but even a few years ago, and it's very common, unfortunately, I saw a young sort of half-caste, I believe she was Māori and English or Māori and Scottish, and they were going into, race relations and critical theory, and it was actually quite a disgusting program, because she sat there and, her dad, because she was half-caste like me, you see, she was multicultural mixed. And so she sat there and her wonderful Pākehā European dad was there. And the camera was on her, and she basically, for the next 5 minutes, just sat there trying to explain to him, why he is racist.
Oh, wow.
Because of systematic racism and all this sort of garbage ideology. And I just sat there thinking, oh my God, I really feel like I'm on crazy pills. Brendan, you often talk about, G.K. Chesterton and all that, and it's true. He said a little bit of common sense goes a long way.
Yeah.
And so no one, not the people recording her, not her talking, no one seemed to realize, well, hang on, it's staring you right in the face. If your dad was racist, he wouldn't have married your beautiful Polynesian mum.
Yeah.
That's just common sense, but the world's gone crazy.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Which brings me to the point of critical race theory, cultural Marxism. How destructive is that? Because a lot of people say that now. There's attempts overseas to ban it in certain places. I'm not sure if that's the right answer, but I understand why, because it is pretty serious what it's claiming about human persons and society and anthropology and even existence and reality. How destructive is critical theory? Is it overhyped, or is it actually quite destructive to the public conversation about race, do you think, in New Zealand?
Critical theory, we can go deeper into where it came from, German idealism of the 18th century and all that. And sorry, just a quick sort of sick joke. Forgive my sort of sick sense of humor, my brother. but it's almost like, these people that believe in critical race theory and critical theory and all these things. And of course, the fruits of those corrupt trees, the rotten fruit of that corrupt tree, the ideology is an offshoot is, because of this whole idea of systematic racism and hegemonic power and group identity and group politics and all these things. It basically says that because of that, every Pākehā or Parangi or European in New Zealand, no matter whether they personally believe themselves to be racist or really aren't racist or whatever, they are by default racist.
Yeah. And
that is total nonsense. It doesn't even make sense, because it's almost like saying, Brendan, even though one of your good friends, B. Eric George is a brown Polynesian, you're still racist by default. You just don't know it yet. Yeah. You're implicitly racist. And it's funny because all these people that believe in this ideology, the ideology actually comes from dead white guys.
Yeah.
So, that's the irony.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's absolute nuts. And I'm getting sick and tired of it, Brendan. And that's why I thank God for shows and movements like your platform, where we can really just fight against this. Because it's you cannot begin to talk about reconciliation if at the root cause of your ideology you want revenge.
Yeah,
that's as simple as that.
Yeah, Yeah, it's even I would suggest that even as a theory, a lot of what it claims, like when you add in the whole intersectionality, which people forget is only invented in 1989. It's a very, very recent ideology too.
Yes,
It doesn't have pedigree. It doesn't have established, tested history, even in sort of academic circles. It just sort of appears on the scene, and people start proposing it, and everyone just sort of it just gets imposed, if you like, upon society. But like when you think about things like the term white privilege, and I'm fond of saying to people, look, if excuse me, if white privilege was something that my parents could have bought on sale at Kmart, we would have had plenty of it. But we grew up, and I stole that line from an American comedian, by the way, but we grew up in a really poor welfare class family, very poor. I was asked to leave high school before I'd even finished my year 13, so 7th form year. Some of my Māori and Polynesian mates at a very low decile high school, they went on and completed and went to university the next year, which I didn't do. Like, people assume that just because you're white, you must be part of the hegemonic privileged class because this theory has told me that. And I think to myself, this is simplistic. It's dangerously reductionist. In actual fact, I think there is privilege in society, but I think it's tied to your wealth and your status. Like if you're in a celebrity class, so that's why you can have something like O.J. Simpson, who's got lots of money and is a celebrity, is able to navigate the American legal system, whereas a poor black man or a poor white man couldn't do what he did. You know?
No. It's so true, and this is what I mean. It's almost like, you know, we've got a really close colleague, Brendan, who I won't name, but you know, as you know, we've got a very close colleague, and he at the moment is, you know, sort of downhearted because he basically, you know, in the green room that time over in Tauranga, my brother, and we were just listening. He was pouring his heart out for him because he basically told me, you know, some clown from the MOE came and this is the thing, you know, forgive my sort of jibs and jabs there, but it's almost like do I believe that the people that believe in this critical theory and critical race theory, are they like demonically possessed people they want to destroy? No, they're not. I really believe that they do have good intentions. The problem is, my brother, you know, we don't live with intentions. We live with consequences.
Yeah.
So you can have all the greatest intentions on the world, but guess what? Your intentions don't mean anything if you have negative consequences. And we're living with that right now. So, and as you know, so the bro just sort of poured out his heart. And, you know, he said to me, I had no problem learning te reo Māori. I have no problem whatsoever, Eric, learning my pepeha, you know, as a Pākehā sort of European teacher. But we had some person from the MOE basically sit down and tell us we got to take a course on how to unlearn our racism. Now, the comment implicit in that is the assumption is that therefore he's racist.
Yeah.
Because you only have to unlearn something, right, that is already learned. And so, you know, and because he's like us, he's not a person to sort of back down when he, you know, if he knows this is wrong, he's not going to just kowtow. So he sort of says, well, hang on, by implication, you're saying I'm racist.
Yeah.
And the person there and all the people there just go, well, no, it's a good thing because, you know, we do have white privilege and we should feel white guilt. And I'm listening to this and I said, my brother, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. And so, see, he had no problem learning about Te Ao Māori, learning about, you know, things to do with cultural competency. He's open to that, right?
Yeah.
But if you have someone sit and point their finger in your face and tell you time and time again, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist, well, guess what? They're really going to be, you know what? Stuff it. I am racist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, and this is just speaking realistically. Let's just keep this real. And that's the problem is, we want reconciliation, but we're going about it the wrong way. Yeah. And if we keep swallowing this nonsense, this toxic sort of ideology, we are going to see more and more division. Yeah. You know, I mean, and it's just so sad. And, you know, he turned to me and he said, you know, Eric, it's only because of the sake of Jesus Christ, for the sake of Jesus Christ, that I'm not actually going that way. Yeah. And I sort of thought about that, my brother Brendan. Imagine if it was the reverse, where people are telling me, well, you know, hang on, Eric, you know, you're racist by default. You actually hate white people. You know, you just don't know it yet. I mean, come on, it's that has nothing to do with personal moral accountability, intention. That's all out the window. That's disgusting.
It seems to me too that it assumes some things that are actually really dangerous as well. It assumes that, I think straight away you'd have to say that Maori people, Polynesian people, anyone who's not white, Asian people, pick another race that's not one of the white races, that they can never be probably racist themselves, that they're always the victim, right, when in that cultural hegemony. So they can never, it ignores all of the disparities between, every race, let's be honest about this, white race has racists in it. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
We've got white racist New Zealanders. So does every other single race. They have racist people who look outside their own group and their own identity, and they are either unfairly prejudiced towards other groups, or they are unfairly fearful and they're biased towards people. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Bang on the money. Bang on the button. And another thing is, people, and this is interesting because I always say this to the marae or wherever I go, or, the conferences, and especially Q&A, because that's always fun. How hot it gets in the kitchen, my bro Brendan.
You handle it well, though, brother. You handle it well. I've been proud to sit alongside you in those panels.
Learn from the best, brother. Learn from the best. And that's not gassing you up. You are good, man. But, I sit there and people be like, it must be hard being a minority. Erica's the victim. I mean, these are not my own people. These are my wonderful, Pākehā European brothers and sisters, but they really mean well, but they sort of pat me on the back. And, it actually comes off as patronizing.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a victim of anything.
Yeah.
And for people to tell me that I'm the victim and that this is going into an apartheid state, which is another cringe, sort of comment there. It's almost like, you must be finding it hard. And I just turned to them and said, did you not hear what I said earlier? Mm-hmm. So when I said I'm a fruit salad, I'm Maori and Samoan, and this is interesting. And this is nothing against, my people. I love them very much. But it's almost like I experienced racism from some of my Samoan family growing up against my Maori side. And then I ran into comments of my Maori side calling some of my Samoan side coconuts and everything.
Wow.
So once experienced it from my European brothers and sisters in society. Not once. I mean, there was one thing, because I no doubt the family's going to tune in and say, hang on, bro, there was that one time. So let me just say that to, my bro Alex and the boys. So we were out there in West City. Yeah. And, we're just dressed in our normal sort of gear there. And we were sort of close to this lovely, Pākehā sister. And what I realized later was, my younger brother, Isaac, if you're watching this, I love you, my bro. But, he's sort of 6'5", and he's really big, friendly as they come. But he's sitting there and he's getting closer and closer and closer to, because we're just a big group, right? We just talk. We just invade each other's personal spaces. So he just turned back and said, could you please step back? Right, so the knee-jerk reaction of one of the bros is like, "Bro, see that racism?" Mm-hmm. Well, hang on, bro. Let's think about this logically. So this is literally the only time I just turned 30, right? So this is literally the only time I've ever experienced something that someone could say would be prejudiced or racist, right? 30 years on this earth. So I just thought about it later, and I said to him, "Well, hang on, if that was our grandma, if that was my grandma Savali, and she was in the countdown, and she was getting her little knickknacks and all that, and she had a walking stick there, and you had a big group of sort of, let's put on the roof, Pākehā sort of guys, and they're encroaching on her space. I mean, she'd probably say something worse. She'd say, get out of my space, So sometimes when we really study these things, we've got to understand it's actually not an example of racism. Not at all.
No, I get concerned too that approach is actually destroying genuine attempts, because there are racist ideas out there. There are ideas that are prejudicial. Again, I look at this and I think a lot of people who are in the elite classes are often actually the ones who are quite happy to keep everyone down, because you can't keep being elite if everyone starts climbing up the ladder. And so you see there's definitely attitudes like that out there. I think of that incident that happened recently with, was it in Tauranga, where they had that public meeting, and the lady starts to say some words in te reo, and someone yells out, speak English. Now, that's awful. But here's the thing I think people missed with that moment, I think. What concerns me is that you've got now people who are publicly having these sort of outbursts, and it seems to me they're not simply reacting to that woman and what she said. They're reacting to an ideology and culture that is being enforced to such a degree that they're now There's actually, it's generating actual racists. I think you said this earlier.
Yes.
That's the
Yeah.
real danger here, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly true. And even in the comments there, because I'm sort of nosy, I sort of sit there with flicking me a little my buttery popcorn, like, oh, here we go, what's happening here? And so I just looked at the comments, and it was actually and our good old buddies at the news media world made a really good show of it, and they often do that, as you know, my bro Brendan, but. They made it almost like they really hyped it up and gassed it up, because actually what really happened from the comments that I was seeing from people that were actually there under the post was when she started to speak to her sort of intro, her mihi to the people in Te Reo Māori, it was only one or two people in the crowd that actually started going, oh, but the other people that were moaning were actually against those two people.
Wow.
You see,
So
but
it's white versus white at that stage, isn't it, too?
Well, that's it. But see, the media just painted it as a bunch of old white people that just hated to hear the Te Reo Māori. And look, while we're on it, because I'm very much like yourself, my bro Brendan, that's why I thank God for your ministry and your family, is because we're people that, because we grew up on the block from the gutter, we're very up the guts. So let me just go there and be up the guts when we're talking about, Te Reo Māori. I'm sick and tired of this idea that because someone does not want to learn Te Reo Māori, they are by default racist. That's absolute nonsense. I mean, let me just say two quick points. The first one is my grandmother, Sa'avali, thank God that she's still here with us. And, she's tough as nails, but she can't for the life of her pronounce, Māori, and therefore she doesn't really, and it's not interested in learning it. For example, we know, you don't have to have a PhD in linguistics to understand that in Māori they have the heavy R, right? So they, like tauranga, right? So r. But in Samoan they only have the soft R. Yeah. Because they use the L as well. So, my grandma can't say, where I grew up half of my life in Kawero, she can't say Kawero, she says Kaurau. Wow. Now, because she says Kaurau and not Kawero, does that therefore mean she's racist? Because that's what I'm hearing. Yeah. This is absolutely total garbage. Now, just a quick caveat on that. It's just common sense. If you don't want to learn... Can I say too that you can't have it both ways. If you say something is so ingrained, like white privilege, right, that it's just in your system and it has to be unlearned, well, wouldn't language also be you pronounce something a certain way all your life and then all of a sudden you have to unlearn it? And it's like, well, why would it... If they're so ingrained without even realizing it, why wouldn't you acknowledge that and at least give them a bit of slack and say, oh, well, that's just because how they've learned to say it, right? Perfect. Exactly it, my bro. And just finishing off that thought there, a quick caveat is, and this is, we all get this we all understand this. Like, I was telling our sister the Q&A in Christchurch just the other week, and I was saying, if you do, whether you're white or not, but if you do have reasons which are racist as to why you don't want to learn Te Reo Māori, then you do need help. There is something wrong in your mind, and you need Jesus. But that in and of itself, and that's just common sense. But that in and of itself does not therefore follow that everyone that has legitimate reasons, like my grandmother, because of her inability to pronounce Te Reo Māori properly, she just therefore can't really be bothered to learn it. That therefore doesn't follow logically or consistently that if you do have a valid reason, you therefore are racist. However, that's what we're seeing here. And it's so sad. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I look at what's happening now too, and I wonder what the merit of it. I was the other day. I was flying back from somewhere, and I think I was reading in the news that they're now talking about having a separate music chart just for Te Reo music. So songs that are in Te Reo they'll be in the main charts, and they'll also have their own separate charts, I think, if I understand the system, what they're proposing. And I think, well, why? Wow. Doesn't that actually sideline Te Reo? Wouldn't you want it in the mainstream? So put it in the main charts and then let it compete and let it hold its own. And if the music's good enough, it will. If it's not, it won't. But if it is, it will hold its own, absolutely. And therefore more people are going to get exposed. So why create these sort of segregated pathways in many ways that are not really productive to helping people embrace the language? Exactly. So true, my bro. And just think about that for a second. We always take it back to simple foundations, simple common sense. So basically what we're getting told is by pushing an agenda of separatism, it's ultimately going to bring about unity. Well, hang on. That doesn't make sense. No. And like, and you're implicitly getting to the point very beautifully, my bro, Brendan. It's almost like what that really does to me, when I look at that from that angle, it's basically saying that Māori music is not good enough to actually be in the mainstream. Therefore, we have to have its own path. We have to insulate it. That's not how you produce good anything. I mean, look, it didn't stop Apiranga Ngāta, one of the greatest scholars in history, or Māori or otherwise, who actually was the first person, not only the first Māori to get a law degree, but the first person of any race. Not that it matters, but I'm just saying how amazing he was. The first person of any race to get a double degree.
Yeah.
So if it didn't stop him, this sort of patronizing idea where, we mean well, but basically because you're not good enough, we're gonna give you treatment that is sort of patronizing. Well, I'm not a victim, Brendan.
No.
I'm not a victim. And I'm sick of people telling me that I am a victim.
Yeah, and, look at things like Sir Howard Morrison. I mean, there's his music is internationally renowned, and I'm a musician myself, and I know his music it's the quality of it is right up there. And you have this beautiful marriage of Māoridom and this beautiful talent, and it opens all these doorways into probably a predominantly, when he was coming up, a very white man's world, you'd have to say.
Yes. Exactly.
Do you think, I'm interested in your take on this, do you think that certain Māori voices then are being quashed as a result of the current, like the media have definitely got their narrative on race relations? Are only select voices being promoted and heard in public? And then, like, you and I, we're having a really robust conversation now, and it's got, neither of us are interested in critical theory. We both want to address legitimate racism where it's there, and we want to actually be brothers in community together, and also have our kids, I think, grow up in that world where they've seen their dads do that and embrace it as well. So where are those voices, and why are we not hearing more of them?
Well, we're not hearing more of it because it's almost like, and speaking on that sort of sphere of Indigenous scholarship, unfortunately, since at least that we've had that sort of, twist, or that sort of sub-school of thought coming under critical theory, coming under critical race theory, and then even a bit earlier than that, you had Paulo Freire, the Brazilian philosopher, and you had critical pedagogy, which is basically critical theory and critical race theory applied to education.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, since at least the 1980s, but going back further than that, Indigenous scholarship has actually by default drunk these toxic ideologies. And so you've got that on one side, and then on the other side, you've got this whole idea, because of the misconceptions historically concerning Christianity and colonization, where now therefore we have to return back to these pre-missionary, pre-colonial beliefs. And again, I know we've touched on this before. It's this whole caricature of, the noble savage. And this is why I have to tell a lot of my Kazi bros and all that, where they're saying, oh, look, we lived in harmony with nature and all these things. I mean, that is true. There was good there. No one's denying that. But I mean, for goodness sake, I'm not being anyone's human Happy Meal. Thank God. Thank God for the missionaries. Thank God that they abolished things like warfare and slavery and child sacrifice and cannibalism. I mean, let's just say it how it is. Now, another point, my bro Brendan, was my friend Aaron. Aaron, if you're watching this, love you to bits, but, he's a graduate from Mass University in psychology, and he was sitting there and he's saying, well, hang on, what, even though, because he's Indian, you see, he comes from the state of Punjab, the warrior, the Saint Sikhs there, the warrior saints, and they're very good people. And he's sort of saying to me, well, hang on, because, I was talking about the idea of sati, where the woman in India, the widow, when her husband died, they would throw her alive on the pyre there.
Yeah, so on the river Ganges.
Yeah, exactly. So she could join him in the afterlife. Now, my bro Aaron, he's quick. He's very quick. And he said to me, well, hang on. Okay, fine. That's good that they stopped their practice. But in Europe, they didn't even give their women the vote. So who do they think? And I'm just talking normally here, nothing against them. I love the bro. But I'm just keeping it real. And I'm going to use this as sort of a springboard to sort of develop some conversation of this. So he basically sits there, and it was good. We're having a few beers, and I was listening to him, and he said, well, who do they think they are to come into our culture and tell us what's what? Now, I let him finish, and I said, my bro Aaron, I love you as my brother. We've been to hell and back. But let me ask you something very quickly. You've got two cultures, right? Culture A, culture B. Culture A hasn't given the woman the right to vote, which is pretty crappy in itself. But in culture B, not only does your woman not have the right to vote, but just so you know, if your husband dies before you, we're going to throw you live on the fire. Are you telling me there's no moral difference between those two cultures?
Yeah.
Think about it. And he goes, well, okay, fine. But what gives the right? I mean, would an Indian person at the time who stopped the practice of sati go and look and tell them to give the woman the vote? I said, Aaron, here's the difference. And then again, I sort of get shot down a lot of times for saying this, but it's, when this idea that all cultures are morally the same, that the moral consciousness of a culture was all equal across all boards, it's a fantasy. It's an absolute fantasy. It's an exercise in futility. And I said, the thing is, and not only as someone that's involved in the Indigenous sphere, but also as someone who loves Jesus, who loves my Lord and my Master, who saved my family from the gutter, from gangs and from alcoholism and from abuse and from drugs. We're not actually judging it from each other's standards, which you could still do morally, objectively, but we're judging it from God's standards.
Yeah,
that's the difference. And because it was down to the European missionaries, because they had the spiritual consciousness to understand that why the Judeo-Christian worldview teaches us, and you've gone a lot about this, Brendan, and helped me develop my ideas on this, and so I thank you for this, my brother, about the Imago Dei. The Imago Dei, the image of God, is so important. We did not have such a thing in indigenous religious systems. You do not have such a thing. Like, for example, I was talking to my great uncle when he was still alive, and he's a fantastically educated man. He knew the Fa Samoa, the Matai system, and also educated in sort of English Western ideas. And he told me the problem with the ideas of afterlife in the traditional Samoan pre-colonial concept was only the chiefs got to go to heaven. Well, hang on. What the heck? So the majority of people, even if you're a good person, because you don't have a Matai title, you by default go to hell? Something's wrong there. It's so drastically different from the Judeo-Christian worldview, which teaches that in your essence, because you're made by loving God, you're all equal.
Yep. Preach it, brother. Let's talk about that then, the issue of colonisation. It's become, again, hot button topic. People now talk, I now am regularly being referred to as being part of the colonial class now. It's just all over the media.
My gosh.
And part of me goes, well, my predominant heritage is actually Irish, and the Irish, we have a lot actually in common with the certain treatments that the Irish people received in common with the Māori people from the English Crown. But I look at it and I think, am I wrong to think that if you're logical and truthful, then you'd have to say it's a mixed bag. So there are things that are absolutely abhorrent, like the land theft and the deception of Māori people and everything else. The things like parihaka, there's awful stuff that happens, but then there's also other things that are actually really positive, like you've talked about the rule of law. So all of a sudden, warring tribes, the end of cannibalism, the introduction of technology. It's a mixed bag, isn't it?
100%. And again, this comment came up in Q&A, and basically the comment was, are you therefore saying, Eric? Are you therefore saying, as an Indigenous person, but not even an Indigenous person, as an Indigenous believer in Jesus Christ, are you therefore saying that colonization was a good thing? Now, the thing is, when we, because what was his name? Not Goldstein. That's the guy from the ASB ad. What was it?
Paul Goldsmith. Paul Goldsmith.
Right. Sorry, Goldsmith. Yes. I don't know. Excuse me. And so Goldsmith gets up there and he basically says, he goes, look, on average, on balance, colonization was a good thing. Everyone just shoots him down and just paints him as some old white dude that's just racist and he's not in touch with reality. Well, hang on, quick pause there. When I don't even think he realized the impact of his statement, because I'm pretty sure he didn't, by his statement, make it inclusive to Christianity. No. Because now, if you include Christianity, even though it was sort of in the vehicle or delivered through colonization to an extent, Christianity now, therefore, hang on now, that's eternal significance.
Yeah.
And I got shot down at the marae a few years ago because basically I was saying this and they were saying, well, hang on, let me just get a metaphysical argument here, sort of, and I said, yeah, let's go. And he said, well, hang on, Kazi, are you saying if you went back in time and Christianity could have been delivered by no other means but colonization? Are you saying that you'd do colonization all over again if it wasn't possible to deliver the gospel that way? I said, okay, first of all, I think you've pushed me into like a false dichotomy because it can be delivered, and it was delivered initially outside of the realms of colonization.
Yeah.
But that's besides the point. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's go up the guts as we always do. I said, based upon your sort of argument there, yeah, I would. Yeah. And they were all shocked. They said, are you kidding me? How dare you? I said, hang on. Because of Jesus Christ and salvation, eternal significance, I am so happy that my people receive Jesus Christ. See, and that's what I think Goldsmith was sort of missing there. He was sort of saying, oh, well, technology versus cannibalism, and that's fine. But if you add Christianity into the mix, it takes on a different dimension.
Yeah.
It takes on a very different dimension because now it has eternal significance, And not only that, when we have the introduction of Christianity, and this was sort of going on about my talks as well through with Confident Christianity. I'm sick and tired, Brendan, of this whole idea where the missionaries came with the Bible in one hand and the gun in the other hand. I mean, just a few years ago, I was online talking about adding my sort of 5 cents here and there, as you do, you sort of pepper now and again, and my cousins who also my sort of relation there, my older relation, who actually holds the same title as me, Be from Naiafu and Alatawa Sisifo. And he comments there and goes, well, yes, we know that. We know that, John Williams came and he had cannons on a ship and they threatened to bomb Malietoa, the ruler, the chief there, the high chief of Samoa at the time. And that's why they accepted Christianity. I said, well, now hang on. Which history are you getting that from? That's not what happened. The Samoan people openly and welcomed Christianity. We received the gospel so that within a few decades, we were already training our first ministers. And in fact, one of the old kuias, one of the old nannies there at my grandma's church, her uncle's bones are still in Papua New Guinea. They didn't know where he was because, so Samoa was producing our own missionaries to send out. We weren't idiots. No one came and forced us to believe anything. This is the sort of patronizing tone, Brendan, that we're dumb, that we didn't know anything about the spirit world. Yeah. We had a highly developed spiritual system, in Te Ao Māori too, in Te Ao Tawhito. The problem was we had the wrong spirit.
Yeah.
So where there was war and revenge, Jesus brought peace and forgiveness.
Yeah, and that's the complexity of it, right? So there's all these complexities that people completely ignore. So they see Paul Goldsmith, they hear him say that thing, and they assume, oh, yeah, typical white guy. They don't understand he's actually got I was talking to someone about this recently. He's got a scholarly background, I believe, in this, and he's actually sat on I think, was it the Waitangi Tribunal, and actually, redressing past wrong. So this guy's not a white racist. That's the first thing.
Exactly.
Then there's the complexity of the fact that, in actual fact, it wasn't a choice between colonization and no colonization. It was colonization by the English or the French or the Dutch. If not, probably the Germans would have come here. The Pacific was being carved up. So someone would have actually done it. It's not like you can turn that switch off. And then on top of that, when you think about missionaries, like, for example, Bishop Pompelia, the Catholic bishop who came here, is hugely influential around different parts of New Zealand, very involved with the Māori, and very, very much he's even trying to convince them not to sign things at Waitangi because he can see what's coming. Right. But he's French. He's not part of the English colonial system at all. He's outside of the system. And he's not the only one, by the way, in that boat who's come here and is not. So there are moments for sure when the colonialists would abuse and utilize missionaries and the missionary spirit and fervor for their own ends. But the simple fact is that you're being, I think, far too simplistic if you treat it all, you lump everything in one and you say, look, part of it for me is, and I'd love to hear your take on this, I think do you think there's a bit of a romanticization of pre-European New Zealand history?
Oh, of course.
That's not really that valid.
Absolutely. And that's like, when we hit on it before about, the sort of noble savage. You see, this idea that, because the indigenous people before colonization, they lived in harmony and it was all rainbows, butterflies and unicorns. And you see, this is going back to Sir Apiranga Ngata. Why I like quoting him is because he's undeniably the best of both worlds. He was the greatest scholar ever to come. Now, there were other good scholars like Sir Peter Buck, but he was, and the great poet Hone Tūwhare, and I could go on and on. But excuse me, Apiranga Ngata was so profound because he, and I've got a quote in my presentation from Sir Apiranga Ngata, and it basically says this: when the Pākehā came, when the European came, they brought one law for all. Mm-hmm. And now we look back sort of retrospectively and we say, okay, so we've got to fight any racist law, that's fine, that's common sense. But what it provided was a cohesive legal system. Because when we think of and he goes, this is one of the whakatawakis, this is one of the sort of proverbs from that time, is that fire over there, go snuff it out.
Yep.
That's one of the proverbs. Imagine that. That fire over there, over yonder, go snuff it up. So that's the mindset.
And that's a reference to tribes, right? That's go and snuff that tribe out, right?
Yep, that's out. So you're there in your pa at the time, you're there at your little village, your fortified village, and you're looking over there, hang on, who are those people? They're on Arohe, they're on our whenua. We're the mana whenua, who are these people? They're having a good time. Let's go and destroy them. So this isn't Eric George saying this. This is Sir Apiranga Ngata, one of the greatest scholars that Māoridom's ever produced. So he was very aware of the fact that despite all the injustices that came as a result of colonization, initially the theft of land and all that, horrible, disgusting behavior, sure. But for goodness sake, don't tell me that it was all butterflies, rainbows, and unicorns. And just very quickly, when people talk about tikanga, because you have cultural competency and that's all good, all these classes and diversity. I mean, some is really cringe, but at the core of it, they have good intentions. But when you talk about tikanga or protocols, when you go to the marae and that, I think there's this image, and it sort of connects about the caricature of the noble savage, where we already had our own law, we already had our own beliefs, and that we all lived in harmony with each other. Sorry, am I on crazy pills? Are you kidding me? Tikanga, and I ran this through Dr. Tiatawai Rerenoi for the translation because I always want to dot my I's and cross my T's. And he's a really good guy, and hopefully you get to meet him one day. He's a fantastic dude, master weaver, tohunga. And he grew up on the marae.
Yeah.
And then Māori, Te Reo Māori was his first language. And he says, look, how would you, when we're talking about this pre-colonial law and we didn't really need the white man, we didn't really need British common law, we didn't really need the Magna Carta, we didn't really need the Judeo-Christian worldview. He just turns to me and said, look, tikanga actually breaks down to two words etymologically, linguistically, tika, which means to be correct or right, and ngā, which means plural, the many. So tikanga means the many different ways to be right. Yeah. That's why if I go to one of my marae down there in Kawerau or Te Teko in Texas, the tikanga or the protocol is very different if I go to my marae in Ōtautahi in Christchurch. Why is that? Where's the uniformity? Where's this whole idea of the noble savage, and they're all sitting in sweat lodges and having these awesome little meetings, and there was no warfare, and it was all peace and bunnies and rainbows. Why? Because life and death, and this is another quote from Sir Apiranga Ngata, life and death was vested in the chiefs. They created, their subjective proclivities was the foundation for tikanga. Yeah. See, that's the problem. So if you had a good chief, yeah, sure, it's all fine and dandy. Your people will prosper. And then there were ideas of forgiveness and all this, but there's also ideas of utu, of revenge. And so if you had a good chief, it was fine. But the problem was if you had an evil chief, the people suffered. And this is the whole point of Apiranga Ngata saying, look, at least when you had the English common law and the Western ideas come through colonization and the coming of our Pākehā European brothers and sisters, everyone was accountable to the law. Yeah. Everyone had a sort of right a right to be heard, natural justice, these different ideas that came from the Judeo-Christian worldview that just didn't come from Athens but came from Jerusalem as well, combining together, and then it took on a form, and in the Magna Carta and so forth and so on, coming out of the English Civil Wars. So, Aparanganata himself says that no, the whole idea about, I don't know whether we're going to get a discussion about the treaty, was to give Maori people one law for all.
Yeah.
One law for all. So that, imagine if you're a chief and you had a bad day, you stubbed your toe and got angry. Oh, I'm going to kill a slave now. Slaves, the taurekareka, the slave caste, through slaves from number 1 to 10, stand up, we're going to kill you because I had a bad day. What kind of law is that? You see, it's so subjective. It's so at a whim. So that's why Sri Aparanganata says, thank God. Sri Aparanganata says, thank God that we have this one law for all. Of course, at the time, the law, he was still battling, some racist tendencies in some of the laws, and that's fine. No one's saying he can't do that. No one's saying that we shouldn't do that. But at least we have a uniformity of one law for all.
Well, it's a tool, right, that you can actually, like, rule of law is a thing that you can, even if your current society is not following a rule of law fairly and justly, it's just a matter of convincing them and showing them where they're missing the point, and then the rule of law kicks in properly, right? But if you don't have the rule of law, you can't even have that conversation, and it's purely about who's got power. Now, the irony, of course, is people would rightly say, well, yeah, Eric, that's good, but, there's no doubt that people who were the elites, they didn't follow the rule of law when it suited them to do so. And I'm like, yeah, well, you're right. But in actual fact, you're misdiagnosing the problem if you're suggesting this is a white man's issue. Because in actual fact, the majority of Europeans who lived under those same people were also treated badly and were oppressed when it suited the elites to do so. It wasn't along racial lines, it was about power and control. At the time, the elites, they tended to look down their nose at those beneath them. And it was either very patronising, or there was a tendency to view them as perhaps being even, certainly after Darwin, genetically inferior.
Right.
So it wasn't even along racial lines. It was just, well, if you were poor, that was because you had the wrong genes and we needed to evolve them out of the gene pool. So race was part of that. Mental health was part of it. Alcoholism, low education. If you didn't have a good education, they blamed genes. So, this idea that it was even... It was simplistic and it was just about race. It was about more than that. It was a whole complex ideology that's going on there.
Far more. Absolutely right, my bro, Brendan. And I love how you brought up about the economic situation, because the funny thing is, growing up there on the west side of Auckland, there's a long road there where we all grew up. Because, I went to Kawerau when I was 10 years old, so I was born and raised pretty much in Auckland West Auckland for the beginning years of my life. The early stages of my life, and we were dirt poor. And the thing is, I remember some guy saying to me at the marae at the Wānanga when I was teaching the sort of social services papers there as a guest lecturer. And fair enough, he sort of wanted to check my, should I say, upbringing credentials. We'll put it that way, Brendan. And he says, well, hang on, you're talking about Immanuel Kant's, categorical imperative and all this nonsense. And he basically said to me, bro, how can we relate to you? Have you lived as I have lived? And I said, well, hang on, brother, don't let this cheap Chinese suit fool you. Don't let my 6 degrees fool you. At the end of the day, I'm from the block, from the gutter. I remember, people have the New Zealand Herald in the newspaper in their toilet to read while they're going toilet. Well, we had it because it was our toilet paper.
Yeah, and we were the same. It was a woman's weekly. Even worse, it was the woman's weekly often.
And the trick, Brendan, the trick was to rub the pages together very quickly because it was slightly smoother on your nono.
Yeah, I'm telling you, a lot of even white people don't get that. But if you're a poor white dude like we were, and there were times when you ran out of toilet paper between welfare payments, you weren't thinking along racial lines at that point. Your neighbour who was Māori on the other side Samoan, you're all in it together.
Exactly. Why? Because our concern was not these white people here. No, our concern was surviving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because as you know, when you grow up in poverty, you don't have time to sit down metaphysical implications of God's aseity. No, you're thinking, where's my next meal coming from?
Yeah, that's right.
How do I get my people, my community off gangs and drugs? And so we grew up with poor white people, and a lot of them, we call them the OG family from their block there in West Auckland, and it was a long road, Roberts Road, going right down the bottom, 100 plus houses, and I remember the family. I can list the families' names right now, and I still see them around West Auckland, and when we see each other, it's like we just saw each other yesterday, because there's that love there that never went away. Because when we saw them, we didn't see white Palangi colonials. We saw white poor people, some of them poorer than us. And let me tell you, that's blimmin' poor.
Yeah.
And we just did whatever it took to survive. And they were sort of like, our cousins. Yeah. Until this day, we never called them friends. They were our family. Because they, when one house didn't have food, the other house, and you know how it is, Brendan, we would help each other and fill in the gaps. So this whole idea that poor white people have some sort of implicit white privilege over a poor minority, it's absolute garbage. It's absolute garbage, and it's coming from people that haven't lived that life.
I'm conscious of the time, so I do want to. We could talk about this all day, but I want to ask some questions to try and bring us to a conclusion here, if I can.
Yes.
Saying that, we're probably going to be another blooming half an hour, knowing us. But let's just look at one quick one that's doing the rounds at the moment. Is what do you think about the proposal to rename New Zealand to Aotearoa? My personal take is this: I think I would be okay with Aotearoa New Zealand, because it acknowledges there's a shared heritage there, because we aren't just a Māori country. We are actually multicultural, and our history is as well. But also, I believe that's going to happen. I think it has to be the people who make the decision, not a small, tiny group of MPs or the media. But what are your thoughts on the renaming of New Zealand?
I remember you telling me, Brendan, and I was, because I sit there, because I always think in my heart, look, if I'm going to learn off someone, I might as well learn from the bloody best. So when I sit there and I hear you talking and you said something about Aotearoa, and this is why I really love your platform, and, you said to me, my brother, it's actually amazing. This is sort of a side comment connected to it. When you're talking about, no one really had a problem with it until the government tried to make a move to push it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that later, and I said, that's actually quite a profound thought. And what I realized, my brother, was what.
By the way, I should say that's the only profound thought I've had this year. Probably won't have another one till next year. So just while Eric's talking me up there.
Hey, don't be humble, man. Come on. No, that's good, my bro. But I thought about the sort of underlying conceptual frameworks, the philosophical assumptions, or they call presuppositions. And what came to me quite surprisingly in my mind was the reason why, what's behind it, what's the wizard behind the curtain. What's really scary is the ideology behind it, the thinking behind it to push this, is because language itself is racist. The English language itself is packaged. It can't be understood in isolation. It's actually, this is how they think, their pseudo type of thinking. Because of critical race theory, and it's so taken to be the norm now, it's so normal now, we want to change New Zealand to Aotearoa because we want to unshackle ourselves from the colonial past, and because the English language is implicitly racist, because it's connected and was delivered through colonization and all this and imperialism. So first of all, that can just be easily shot down to pieces. Yeah. Because we know that, languages, and it reminds me of, when I think you tagged me in the article some years back when this American professor tried to say mathematics was racist. I said, oh my God. But anyway, just, so these are the really filthy, toxic, annoying, irrational sort of ideologies. So that's why I believe why that push is there. But secondly, I'm fine, as an Indigenous person, and my Samoan is really quite disgusting. I sort of got a brush up on my my Te Reo Māori is slowly getting there. And as someone that's learning Te Reo Māori, as an adult for the last 4 years, and it's wonderful. I started to have dreams in Te Reo Māori, so that's really cool. Awesome. But it's like, if New Zealand's fine for me. Look, right now on my passport, people don't get this. I got my passport. They got no stamps on my passport, but that's a different story. So, in my passport there, it's got New Zealand and underneath Aotearoa. Well, what's the problem? Do you know what I'm saying? And so that's because the implicit thing behind it is we have to unshackle our language to disconnect it from the past. But the funny thing is, you've even got the governmental crest of the Maori chief, in the actual crest there. what more do we want?
Yeah.
What more do we want? And I agree, if we're talking pragmatically, practically, I agree with your main point, Bro Brandon. Just have it hyphenated or something. But, like, and it reminds me of what, Dr. Walter Martin said, the godfather of counter cult apologetics. Because he said, look, you can have the same bottle of poison. No matter what label you put on it, it's not going to change anything. And this is the thing. The government wants to change the surface, but the problem is the hearts and minds of the people.
Yeah.
And it goes back to sin. And sorry, I know this isn't a sort of evangelist, Pentecostal platform, but that's what I want to say very quickly. I'm very sorry but wherever I go, I want to lift up the name Jesus, because without him, my family would all be dead.
Oh, bro, don't be sorry about that.
And so I love, I love Jesus. And so when we talk about reconciliation, it's actually a triangle. It's not just between Pākehā and Māori. We need Jesus in there, because it's only by God's Holy Spirit that enters you and changes the way you talk and walk and treat other people. And that's how you get perpetual, everlasting, true sort of unity there, is you need Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit of the living God in you.
Yeah, that's awesome, brother. Because I was going to ask you that actually. The next question is, how essential is Christ and Christianity, do you think, to the project of racial harmony in New Zealand? Because I look at it, I don't see how you can get there without it. The best you can hope for is some sort of weird system where we just sort of almost coexist in two different channels, but never recognise our common brotherhood and sisterhood made in the image of God, which actually truly unites us, right?
Amen. That's it. And see, this is the thing. Only Jesus is powerful enough, is great enough to transcend those cultural divisions, you see. And that's why I believe it was St. Augustine, he said, I've read Plato, I've read Socrates, but never once have I heard all the ancient philosophers say, come unto me, all who are heavy laden, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in thee, O God. People say, well, Eric, statistically, hang on, brother, I am a statistic. Me and my family, we're living proof that the way we treat others, not just Polynesian, but other Polynesian people, other gangs, other tribes. The reason why we treat these people with respect and dignity is because of Jesus Christ. It is for the sake of Christ that me and my whole family have changed the way we are. Again, not perfect, but progress and true progress and everlasting perpetual forgiveness and unity. I am convinced, my brother, from lived experiences, I am convinced can only be done powerfully and without a doubt through Jesus Christ of Nazareth, my master and my Lord.
Yeah, because I think what it does, right, because the sacred order of Christianity teaches us some really important things. First of all, it teaches us that none of us is without sin. So none of us is perfect. It teaches us that we're all morally equal regardless of race or gender or status in society. So we're all made in the image of God. We're all equal. It teaches us that every one of us is profoundly important, that we're not just slaves of the gods. We actually are, God becomes one of us. That's how important we are. And then also, it teaches us that we must have mercy and love for all. And it tells us to go out, not just to hold that in your heart. Oh, yeah, I love people as a sentiment, but go and love your neighbour literally and practically. So all of that combined, it seems, is absolutely essential if you are going to have a unified and whole New Zealand, which still allows and recognises diversity of racial heritage and culture and traditions that are still being brought along that journey as well.
Tika, saolele, that's correct. 100% agreement, my brother.
Tell me, the Treaty of Waitangi, you mentioned it earlier. What do you? It's because I'm going to be very prudent here and say I thought I had a grasp on this, but it seems that because I thought New Zealand had made some really good progress with treaty claims and treaty settlements. But then I understand there are still some, even within Māoridom, there are some disagreements about certain tribes that felt that other tribes perhaps signed on to things that they didn't want to sign into. So I'm now a little bit at sea, and I think, is it a little bit more complex than I first thought? Yes,
and once again, let's go up the guts here. So, and this always gets me in trouble because I I just say it how it is. I say it how I call it. I call it how I see it. So, so the idea was, okay, the Waitangi Tribunal was set up in 1975. The whole idea about that was they were a group of scholars, historians, and some lawyers here as well, and their idea was to make recommendations to the Crown to set up a system where there was true injustices. So, when you talk about land sales, and there's a few categories: land that was sold or gifted legally and done in a proper way, land that was confiscated through war, and land that was just flat out stolen.
Yeah.
But now you see there's a little bit of overlap between the first and second categories.
Yeah.
The Taonga Tribunal was set up in 1975, and their whole idea was to make recommendations to the Crown to hear true historical grievances from the various iwi around the motu, around New Zealand, different tribes. And where they found that it was a true violation, a true sort of just straight out, took it by force, deuces, catch you later, I'm going to walk off stage now, thanks for the land, which is real horrible. They made recommendations to the Crown. And the funny thing is, everyone goes on about, because I heard, when I go to Wānanga and my lefty indigenous scholars there, my cousins over there, say, well, yeah, there's actually two treaties. There's actually the Māori treaty, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and then the English treaty. Okay, well, the funny thing is the Waitangi Tribunal actually puts emphasis on the Māori version.
Interesting.
So that kicks that out of the hole, because that's what the majority of the 500 chiefs signed. Was the Māori version. So this whole idea coming from the left about there's actually two treaties and you've got to honour this. Well, hang on. This is why I love New Zealand. We had a problem. They got together and they found a solution. Now, my problem is this, and this is from someone who is looking from the inside and looking out. Okay, so you've given, let's just say that Tribe A suffered some historical grievances. Okay, sweet as. Now they go to the Waitangi Tribunal, they lodge a sort of complaint there, an application, submission. Then a few years down the track, they hold some hui, they hold some meetings, and okay, they finally say, we're going to give a redress, we want to give some compensation. Nothing wrong with that, that's fine, okay? Step 1 and 2 are in place. Kia ora, let's go. Now here's the third step. The Crown then gifts hundreds of millions of dollars, between tens of millions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars to said iwi, Tribe A. Well, hang on now. Now I see the tribal leaders of the same tribe pull up in a limo, and and all their families have flash stuff, and well, hang on, where's the money gone? So this is the problem. We have internal problems as well. And again, I'm not here to crap on my people. I'm not trying to say that, but let's just keep it real. Because what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. It's all good to sit on the marae. Yeah, fine, kia ora. Sit on the marae and point the finger at colonization's fault. Well, why don't we take some moral accountability for our own take, for our own arurarus? I mean, look, not to be that guy, but I'll just say it how it is. Two very simple words: embezzlement, the word embezzlement, and wānanga. Yeah. Type those two words in Google. There's the evidence you need right there. So as someone, okay, fine, we've got the Crown, or at the time stuffed up severely on a few things. That's okay, that's fine. Now we set up the Waitangi Tribunal. Then we have talks. The problem is the third stage. The problem is I'm seeing some behaviors amongst my own people where they've received tens of millions. That's a lot of money. They've seen tens of millions of dollars. It stays at and this is what what I believe Uncle Winnie is really good on when he said this comment, was Uncle Winnie gets up there, once the president gets up there, he says, it just benefits the Li Māori, it never goes down to the bottom. Well, that's so true. Now, you do have some, because not all tribes are the same, you have some tribes that do have a sort of, their heads on a bit more straight, and they're not really sort of, got their hands in the cookie jar. Yeah. People say to me, well, hang on, can you name their tribes? I mean, I'm that guy. I will name them tribes. I can name them right now. Ngaitahu, one of my tribes there, Ngaitahu from the South Island, they are a very clever tribe. We've got over $1 billion in assets. Yeah, and because they have all the greenstone and all that there in Ngaitahu. My 7 nieces and nephews, I love them very much. They're little brats too sometimes, but they go to Kit McGrath. They get their Kit McGrath paid. They get their self-defense courses paid. They get their swimming paid. They get everything paid. In fact, when you turn 65 as a member of Ngaitahu, the tribe in the South Island, you get a kaumatua little package as well, and they set up their own flats for the kaumatua. So You know, when you have a tribe,
I understand too. They're running a dairy training scheme as well. For they have an apprenticeship for their own people. They really help the tribe, right?
Yeah, no, everything. So that's and this is funny because you almost see a connection to the past there with Sir Apiranga Ngāta's quote about tikanga and good leadership. When you have an iwi or a tribe, which you happen to be a member of, and you have good rangatira, the good chiefs up top that want to help the people, you prosper. When you don't, that's when all the stories of embezzlement come up. When you Google those words, wānanga and embezzlement. Again, not here to down my people. I love my people. I want to help my people. I'm proud to be Māori. Everywhere I go, I carry that name Ngāhoro from the Pauwhare family of Murupara, from the rohe of the Tūhoe people. But let's just keep it real. Not every iwi is the same in terms of acting according, never mind to their own tikanga, but to even the law. What they're doing is illegal. They're taking this money from the crown, and they're using it for themselves, not for the collective, for the individual, for those elite Māori up top that sit on the runanga boards. Yeah. And there's something really wrong for this thing. Now, just very quickly, my bro Brendan, I remember one kaumātua pulling me up and saying, "Oh, ngāhoro," because that's what they call me. You see, they don't call me Eric. They say, "Ngāhoro, thank you for your speech, boy, but hang on. That's just the way I can sort of get away from that is that's just learned behavior. So there's these Māori leaders that did their learned behavior. So, well, no, hang on. When are we going to get that finger that we point? And on some cases, rightly so. Hey, this was wrong. You colonization. Hey, the white man. Well, hang on. Take that same finger and point it to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what the Bible is very clear. Jesus says, what did he say? Take the plank out of your own eye before you reach for the speck in your neighbor's eye.
Yeah. Again, I guess that point is that the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every person, and it's irrelevant a race that all of our struggle is, which is where I want to finish up with this final question for you. Then, what are some practical things we as can do, like to actually? So, how do we bridge racial divides where they might exist? How do we create better racial community between people of different ethnicities without being woke? Without being insincere, turning up with a big bone carving. Oh, look at me! I'm Tate Brendan, of Ngāti Pākehā, and it's like, oh, shut up. It's how do we do that in a way that's real? Because I'll tell you, look, I used to. This is where cultural appropriation is actually. There are times when I agree. Some cheap outfit over in America or Europe steals the haka to sell a product, and you're like, the Māori people have got every right to say stop that, but because it's exploitation. But then I used to go to Australia, for example, when I speak over there, and I would, with pride, I would tell people about and I'm not Māori that I know of, but I would talk about our Māori heritage, and I would use the word "our" to describe it, and I would talk about the how proud that sort of that warrior instinct and some of those skills that the English actually took from the Māori because they were so effective at it, and certain other things, and I would use the word "our" to describe that it was part of my history. Now it's like that's cultural appropriation. So how do we do this then? How do you think we can bridge those divides, create a shared history, and also address any injustice and wrongdoing along the path?
Yes, and again, I think we've already touched on it to a degree because people always say, "Well, hang on, bro, you've got all these awesome ideas and these qualifications, and it feels like you're just sort of doing the Michael Jackson on stage and being, all we need is Jesus, bye." Is it really as simple as that? Well, to be honest, it is. It is really as simple as that. But going a bit, sort of off that, I don't want to leave Jesus to the side because he's the foundation of our lives, but. Let's look now pragmatically. Let's look at a practical example. Okay, so at the Tauranga conference, I had a Kiwi doctor. He was Zimbabwean. He was born in Zimbabwe, but he came up to me and he said, "Oh, look, Eric, fantastic talk. I'm really encouraged." He goes, "Look, I'm actually a GP." And I said, "Oh my gosh, please don't tell me you brought a scale here to weigh me." And he goes, "No, I'm not that guy." But he said, "Look, I'm in a rural place, a rural community, and I don't know how to relate to to the Māori people of that community. They believe me to be racist." And I said, "Well, okay, do you say anything or whatever?" And they go, "No, look, they're good people, but I want to help them. But there's one guy, for example, the doctor's telling me, there's one guy who comes in to get checked up, And I just say to him, I said, look, mate, if you don't stop, eating all the pies, and if you don't start exercising, getting your cardio up, you're going to die of a heart attack. And then he says, then the guy looks at him, oh, you're racist and I treat you and all this, which unfortunately is very cringy, but this is a real life example, right? This isn't pie in the sky. This is an actual dude who's struggling. How does he relate to the people? Because he loves the people. He wouldn't be a doctor if he didn't want to save lives. But he says, they just throw the colonization thing back at him. Now, in my heart, I really wanted to tell him, well, tell that guy to give me a phone call, tell him to get over himself. But but he says, I can't say that. I'm in a professional environment. I said, okay, fine. Look, let's talk practically. And I told him, look, my cousin is actually a prison warden, is an officer in the Maxi prison up here just above Auckland, and so he's seen some horrible, terrible things. And so there was a Tongan guy that was, throwing stuff around in the cell, and they were dressed up like Spartans. They had their riot shield and everything. They said, bro, put the shank down. We're going to come in there. We're going to give it to you, because they try to de-escalate the situation. And they said, hang on, is there anyone that speaks Tongan? Because they're trying to talk to him in English. So they called the Tongan guy who just was on shift. He came in, he spoke Tongan to him, and it just hit him like a ton of bricks. The guy just dropped the shank. He said, okay. So there's something about, in your own language that communicates to the heart. There's this saying is, if you speak the lingua franca, another man's language is to your head, but if you hear your own language, it's to your heart. So going off that, I said to the doctor, I said, look, thank you, doctor, for your service, but just very quickly, the most practical and positive advice I can give you is learn a few phrases in Te Reo Māori. Because that's not tokenistic. Just say, look, ake te pehe a koe. Are you mawiwi? Are you sick? Are you pai ana? Are you all right? Or just say kia ora, or just say tēnā koe. I mean, these simple tokens, because there's something about it that will disarm and bring those barriers down.
Yeah.
You see, so one of the things is about languages. Yes, I'm all for learning the language, but I'm just not for how the government's doing it.
Okay.
The government is going so radical on the equilibrium of left and right. They've gone so far left that, again, just with our mutual colleague there, they were talking about earlier, Brendan, it's actually putting people off. Because what's tying to the idea of learning the language is not so you can relate to people, which is why I want to encourage people to learn Te Reo Māori, is to relate to people, connect to people, to bring about true unification. No, what the government's pushing, the implicit underlying assumption there is you learn Te Reo Māori because you have to unlearn your racist ideologies.
Yeah, deconstructing whiteness, right? Rather than building community.
Yeah. So that's what I would say is just, if you really want to outreach to Māori people, go to the marae, learn some of the language, connect with them on that level. Have a few beers in the garage with them, get to know your. Just little things like that.
Practical question about marae protocols and stuff. Can anybody, it's weird. If you're a white boy, that the local school has an open day, or the local aero club has an open day, you go along. But what are the protocols on a marae? Can anyone go to a marae and say, look, I just want to be present? Or how do people do that?
Oh, yeah, sure. One of the ways is you can go to what they call noho, which is like sort of short overstay blocks, and getting to know the cultural experiences. And there's two ways. So you can, I would encourage, you could go through the local wānanga, because the wānanga like Te Awanuiarangi, or Te Wānanga o Raukawa, or TWOA, Te Wānanga o Aotearoa, they're a real good one. And they've already got these sort of partnerships or understandings or MOUs with these different marae in Tāmaki and around the motu. And so you hit up the wānanga, you enroll in a free course in Te Reo Māori, and you can actually go to the marae under the sort of umbrella of the wānanga. But look, not even that. If you really want to just go to the marae, Google the marae, or look at their Facebook page, find a number, ring them up and say, hey, can I just have a quick tour of the marae? They're not going to come out and say, oh, you can't, because 99% of the time, if you really are interested, Māori people are manaakitanga, they're hospitable, they'll welcome you, they'll teach you, what you want to learn. But it's about taking that first step, because it's really funny. Like, we've got Māori people sitting in the marae thinking all white people hate them. We've got white people sitting in their living room thinking all Māori people. Someone has to make the first move. Because we can't let the government make the first move, because the government is nuts. The government has drunk the Kool-Aid, so we can't let them make the first move. We've got to go back to, reaching out to your neighbor across the fence, reaching out to your local marae. That's how we're going to bring about this true unity.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess the key thing too is we've got to give each other grace, extend grace to each other. This is where, the Christian, sacred order comes in so importantly, the whole idea of mercy and grace. Like, the reality is, as a white boy, I'm going to make plenty of mistakes trying to pronounce te reo words. I'm going to make a meal of things. I'm going to not understand everything. And so I'm going to need your grace. And on the flip side of that, I also need to extend grace to you, perhaps, if the assumption is that I'm just a racist white dude, and in actual fact I'm not. That grace, we just need to give each other slack to I guess.
So true.
It's like getting married, right? You don't have it all figured out and the day you get back from the honeymoon. It takes years of journeying together to actually form that solid community between persons, eh?
So true. 100%, my brother Brendan.
Well, with that in mind, brother, all I can say is thank you. It's just been amazing. Look, I've been really blessed by our conversation, and so, Eric, thank you so much for coming on. It's just been awesome.
No worries. Thank you very much. Whaftai lava, mori awa noa, and kia ora, my bro. Thank you so much. God bless.